Buster Keaton. Far from the blinding lights and ruthless pace of early Hollywood, Buster Keaton vanished, not in smoke and mirrors, but into a quiet ranch in Woodland Hills. Surrounded by rolling citrus groves, his modest retreat was no celebrity mansion. It was a sanctuary, a world away from the fame that once lifted him high and then dropped him just as fast. Here, he wasn't the fearless daredevil leaping off rooftops or surviving train wrecks. He was simply Buster, the man, not the myth. With grease on his hands and tools on his bench, he poured his genius into intricate gadgets and whimsical machines. It was the same creative fire, just without an audience. He'd wander the ranch's paths in silence, no cameras, no scripts, just the sound of wind in the trees and ideas sparking in his mind. This wasn't exile. It was freedom. The kind of peace no amount of applause could ever buy. It wasn't grand, but it was his. And in that stillness, Buster Keaton found what Hollywood never gave him. Elizabeth Taylor. Tucked above the sun-kissed, cobbled streets of Puerto Vallarta stood Casa Kimberly. Not just a home, but the living theater of Hollywood's most passionate love story. Gifted to Elizabeth Taylor by Richard Burton, the villa was a jewel of indulgence and intensity. Two residences, split by design, were joined by a pink stone bridge, a poetic nod to Romeo and Juliet. Fitting for a romance that was equal parts fantasy and fire. Within those walls, they lived like royalty. Lavish dinners stretched into moonlit tequila-soaked nights, and days were spent aboard their private yacht, basking in the heat of the sun and each other. But the same fire that drew them together often exploded into fierce arguments. Locals say their shouting would echo through the hills, only to be replaced moments later by laughter and a passionate reunion. Even after their marriage crumbled, Taylor held on to Casa Kimberly, as if the stone walls themselves clung to every whispered secret and shattered wine glass. Today, the villa breathes as a boutique hotel, but its soul belongs to a love too wild, too intense, and far too bright to ever last. Frank Sinatra. In the heart of Palm Springs, beneath the searing desert sun, stood a home as cool and commanding as its owner, Frank Sinatra. Twin Palms wasn't just architecture, it was attitude. Sleek, sharp, and impossibly stylish, the mid-century modern retreat shimmered with glass walls, clean lines, and a piano-shaped pool that glittered like a Vegas show under the daylight. Built in the 1940s, as Palm Springs transformed into Hollywood's secret playground, this house became the epicenter of elite indulgence. The Rat Pack lounged by the pool, Marilyn Monroe turned heads, even presidents sipped cocktails beneath its roof. Sinatra's state-of-the-art sound system hummed his voice through every corner, while secret passageways whispered that here, not everything was meant to be seen. But when the parties faded and the laughter died down, Twin Palms transformed. After his stormy marriage with Ava Gardner fell apart, Sinatra haunted the halls alone, playing "I'm a Fool to Want You" on a loop, his heartbreak echoing through empty rooms. The house that once roared with celebration now sat still, a silent witness to the loneliness of a legend. Twin Palms was more than just a glamorous hideaway. It was where the chairman of the board confronted his most private pain. Judy Garland. Judy Garland's Malibu beach house was meant to be her refuge, a sunlit escape from the chaos of Hollywood. Modest compared to the estates of other stars, it held something more precious: freedom. Nestled along the Pacific coast, the home became her sanctuary, a place where she could laugh without cameras, barefoot in the sand, building castles with her children, Liza, Lorna, and Joey. Those who knew her remember her wrapped in a blanket on the deck, eyes locked on the horizon, as if the ocean could offer the peace that fame never could. It was a place of joy, yes, but not untouched by pain. Financial storms gathered. Addiction crept in. The house that once echoed with children's laughter sometimes fell silent, its walls a quiet witness to her battles. Some nights were filled with friends and music, others with solitude and waves crashing like reminders of a dream slowly drifting away. Judy loved the house deeply, but even she knew it couldn't save her. It became a bittersweet monument, a beautiful illusion of freedom, in a world that never let her truly escape. Orson Welles. Far from the blinding flashbulbs of Hollywood, Orson Welles found his refuge atop the cliffs of Ronda, Spain. His villa, carved into the rugged Andalusian landscape, felt like a secret world, timeless, poetic, and utterly detached from the pressures of fame. Here, Welles wasn't the genius director under studio scrutiny. He was a dreamer, a writer, a man who traded scripts for siestas and red carpets for cobbled streets. Days slipped by in a quiet rhythm. Long afternoons spent crafting stories that may never reach the screen, evenings shared with poets, painters, and bullfighters. Among them, the legendary Antonio Ordóñez became more than a friend. He was a window into a culture Wells grew to love fiercely. Spain wasn't just a hideaway. It was transformation. In its language, its passion, its traditions, Wells found a piece of himself untouched by Hollywood's demands. Though many remember him for Citizen Kane or The War of the Worlds, those close to him knew his truest role might have been right there in Ronda, as a man finally at peace, surrounded by the art and life he adored. Jean Harlow. High in the quiet woods of Lake Tahoe, far from the glitter of Hollywood, Jean Harlow found her peace. Her log cabin, modest and tucked between towering pines, stood in stark contrast to the image the world knew: platinum blonde, silk gowns, the life of the party. But here, in nature's embrace, she was just Jean. With her fiancé, actor William Powell, she would retreat to the mountains, seeking stillness in the crisp alpine air. They spent days walking forest trails, laughing over simple meals, and watching the lake shimmer beneath the stars. It was a place where love felt safe, and fame felt far away. But the serenity didn't last. When Harlow tragically died at just 26, the cabin became something else entirely, a shrine to a love unfinished. Powell was heartbroken, returning to the cabin not for joy, but to remember the woman he lost. Today the cabin still stands, weathered and quiet, like a frozen moment in time. A retreat that once held promise now whispers of what might have been, and the fragile beauty of an escape too brief. David Niven. Perched along the sun-drenched cliffs of St. Jean Cap Ferrat, Villa Fiorentina was more than just a home. It was a masterpiece of elegance and escape. With sweeping views of the Mediterranean, manicured gardens, and cypress trees rising like sentinels, the villa reflected the grace of its most iconic resident, David Niven. While the estate often played host to Hollywood's elite, think moonlit soirees and champagne-fueled conversations, it wasn't just a backdrop for glamour. For Niven, it was a haven, a place where he could shed the persona of the charming leading man and simply be. Days passed in quiet rhythm. He painted. He wrote. He stared out at the endless blue horizon, thoughts drifting like the waves below. The villa became his sanctuary, a delicate balance of refinement and solitude, far removed from the noise of movie sets and flashing cameras. Even in his final years, Niven remained devoted to the sea and the serenity it brought. Villa Fiorentina wasn't just a retreat. It was the heartbeat of a life lived with dignity, wit, and a longing for something deeper than fame. Rita Hayworth. Rita Hayworth's villa in Marbella was a vision of paradise. Whitewashed walls, terracotta roofs, and panoramic views of the Mediterranean stretched before her like a postcard come to life. To the outside world, it was everything a movie star could dream of: serene, beautiful, and untouched. But beneath the sun-kissed tranquility, Rita grappled with the shadows of her past. Fame, love, and heartbreak had all left their mark. The villa, once a symbol of escape, became a place for deep introspection. Here, she could let go of the persona of the pin-up queen and just be, without the weight of the world watching. Though the landscape was stunning, the isolation felt heavier at times. Surrounded by beauty, Rita confronted the loneliness that fame often left in its wake. The villa, with its quiet corners and breathtaking vistas, was more than a retreat. It was a sanctuary where she could reconnect with the woman behind the iconic image, fragile, introspective, and yearning for peace. Vivian Leigh. Vivian Leigh's Tickerel Mill in Sussex was more than just a retreat. It was a sanctuary from the whirlwind of fame. Nestled in the heart of the English countryside, the 17th-century estate, with ivy-clad brick walls and expansive gardens, offered a peace that Hollywood could never provide. Here, away from the glitz and glamour, Leigh found solace in the simple rhythms of nature. Her days were spent nurturing the gardens, painting quietly by the fire, or getting lost in books. The estate's serene beauty was the perfect escape from the turbulence of her personal life, including her battles with bipolar disorder. Tickerel Mill became a place where she could leave behind the world's expectations and simply be. No makeup, no roles to play, just a woman seeking inner peace. Though her struggles were many, this secluded mill remained Leigh's refuge, a place where she could reconnect with herself and find the strength to face the world anew, one quiet moment at a time. Yul Brynner. Yul Brynner's Château de Creuse, nestled in the heart of France's Loire Valley, was a sanctuary far removed from the demands of Hollywood. With its weathered stone walls, sprawling vineyards, and the air of a forgotten century, the estate became Brynner's escape, a place where he could step away from the spotlight and indulge in the passions that truly defined him. Here, he spent hours immersed in photography, capturing the world through his lens, or losing himself in the music that filled his soul. Intimate gatherings were held with artists, writers, and intellectuals, where deep conversations flowed freely, far from the shallow distractions of fame. The chateau, with its rich history and quiet beauty, offered Brenner the freedom to explore his inner world, free from the roles that made him famous. It was his private kingdom, one where he could be a man of depth, creativity, and thought. The Loire Valley was not just an escape, it was where Brenner's true self could breathe. Grace Kelly. Grace Kelly's palace in Monaco was a vision of old-world opulence, gilded halls adorned with frescoed ceilings, sweeping views of the Mediterranean, and a grandeur that belonged to another era. To the world, it was the epitome of royalty, a life of privilege and power. But for Kelly, it was often a gilded cage. Though she had married into royalty, the weight of her new life felt suffocating. The demands of her royal duties and the rigid expectations of her position left her yearning for something more, freedom. The palace's private gardens became her sanctuary, a rare place where she could momentarily shed the burden of her title and simply be Grace. In the quiet of the gardens, she found solace among the flowers and trees, her only company the breeze and the distant sound of the Mediterranean waves. Here, she could escape the pressures of royalty, if only for a moment, and breathe a sigh of relief in the midst of her royal duties.